we don't need a quorum, but we have some people here in the room. We have, hopefully you can see us, but I know we appear kind of small in the room. So for the mayor and Councillor Hightower who are joining remotely, we have Councillor Carpenter, Councillor McGee, and Councillor Barlow here in person. And various staff members who are presenting. And we're sorry you're not here in person because the first Marvelous Night does include snacks to make it a little bit more marvelous. But thank you for joining remotely anyway. So we have 5 budget presentations for tonight. It is our lightest night, so buckle up. The ones next week have 8 or 9. So I think we can get through this pretty quickly. The first 2 I am doing, so just give me a brief moment and I will share my screen here. We are starting with one that does not sound interesting, and yet it is. The non-departmental budget.
Who are the non-departmental staff? Are they non-staff?
So
A lot of revenue there.
that's why we're starting with, what is the non-departmental budget? One of the reasons you should care about it is because this is the budget that includes the famous Big 5. And I've listed them here. The first one is property taxes. And as we know, we talk about the property tax rate. But in reality, this is made up of 13 individual tax rates. Some of them are dedicated to specific purposes, like the retirement tax, penny for parks, and they just pass through the general fund. And they don't really affect that, and others go directly to the general fund bottom line. We also have these payments called pilot that are kind of like property taxes, and they are payments that are made in lieu of those taxes by nonprofit organizations. And that's why I have the picture of the pilot here, because otherwise it'd be a pretty boring slide. And it was not so easy to find a female Black pilot, but you can find pictures if you search hard enough. The other 3 revenues that are included in the Big 5 are franchise fees, and these are fees paid primarily by water and electric to be able to use our streets in the provision of utilities. And then gross receipts and local option tax, we talk more about. Gross receipts is also called meals and entertainment tax, and that is a 2% tax that we is collected by the state, but then we receive that money on any meals, entertainment, alcohol, hotel rooms. And then the local option tax is an additional 1% sales tax. And that is both administered by the city, and then that 1% is also retained by the city. Here is a historical view of pilot, and I apologize if it is hard to see, but I wanted to be responsive to some of the requests to go back to FY18. And what you will see here is that we have a few different categories of pilot. The first one is what the state pays to us. The next 3 are all water. It's water, wastewater, and stormwater. The 4th one is BED. And then we have an other category. And those tend to be small nonprofits that all told, their pilot payments individually are very small, and that's why I've combined them. You can see that in FY18, 19, and 20, really until the reappraisal, the numbers under pilot were really pretty stable. And then we see wastewater and BED have dropped in FY21. And that is because of the reappraisal. And these numbers are automatically calculated. We are in discussions, and water, wastewater, stormwater will be making up this difference in pilot of funds that usually go to the general fund via an increased franchise fee. And we expect the same from Burlington Electric, and I'll get to that in a moment. This is the historic view for gross receipts and local option tax. You will see local option has been surprisingly stable throughout the pandemic. Some of you know that I jokingly have referred to this as the Amazon effect, because when you noticed during those months in early 2020, when people were not on Church Street, they were at home ordering things online. And the local option tax is destination-based, meaning if you order something online and receive it at your Burlington address, if it's something that is, you were going to pay local option tax on it on Church Street, you would also be paying that from Amazon. So that has been a fairly steady revenue stream for us. And you can see even during FY22, we budgeted higher for that. We do expect to exceed our budget projections. And you'll see right now for FY23, we had originally projected 2.8 million, and that is before we knew that FY22 would come in at 3 million. So at this point, we're looking, could we raise that a little bit? Gross receipts, you will see, took a very big dip in FY21. In FY18 and 19, we were up above $4 million. FY23, FY21, 2 million, but we are projecting to be back at 4 million this year, and we are expecting that to continue in FY23. After discussions with my staff, gross receipts have historically kind of always tapped out around $4.2 or $4.3 million. So while I think we will get back to that level, it's unclear if we will exceed that level. Here's what I was talking about with the franchise fees. We could call this the most stable rate of all. It's been at $2.1 million for the past 5 years. And this year we are budgeting for an increase, and that is because of this issue I spoke about with the pilot. What expenses are in non-departmental? $11 million, or more than half of the category, is interfund transfers. Again, there's no good pictures. If you Google interfund transfers, that's what this tree is supposed to be. And again, there's many that are required: TIF, street capital, penny for parks. It's those kinds of items. The other expenses in non-departmental include our debt service. And then there's some items, and I've listed some of them here, that are appropriate to have in non-departmental because they're really citywide expenses. Our BT data charges, electricity, the security Chocolate Thunder for City Hall Park or all of City Hall, those kind of items. Normally in the non-departmental budget, we review the detailed tax rate. We're not quite ready to do that, so we're going to push that to next week. But that's, I'm sure, everyone's favorite chart, where in the end we wind up with what our proposed tax rate is, but we'll go through in great detail each of those dedicated tax rates. And that's it for non-departmental. What questions or discussion would anybody have?
I have a question about the franchise fees taking up part of the pilot. Could you explain what a franchise fee is? And then secondly, are we handling pilot for BED and wastewater differently this year than we have historically because of these franchise fees?
So the franchise fees are fees that come from companies that need to use our streets to provide services. So these are natural gas, cable TV, electric. It used to be like a landline telephones. I doubt that's much of an issue now. And they pay these fees to us as compensation for actually using the streets. And it is a percentage of the company's gross revenue. I believe it's 3.5%. Do not quote me on that part, but if you're very interested, I will find out. We have been in great discussions with Megan Moyer and Chapin because how pilot has worked with water, wastewater, and stormwater. Pilot in general is very complicated calculations. And Megan has been working with some of my staff to try and simplify that and provide more predictability for her budget, while also how do we make the general fund whole. So yes, we will be coming to you with a change to franchise fee because we will, I think, need city council permission to increase that percentage, but that would then apply to all of the utilities, not just water. Any other questions? All right, great. Let's move on to the clerk treasurer's office. All right. Here are the functions of the clerk treasurer's office. It's not just budgeting and collecting taxes. As you know, we also issue a variety of license. We keep all of your land and vital records, conduct elections, administer grants, payroll, retirement, purchasing. If you don't know who does it in the city, there's a decent chance it happens in CT. In addition to our kind of keeping the lights on, these are some of the big FY22 results. We implemented a very large project on project accounting to ensure that some of our large capital projects, well, really all of our large capital projects, we have accounting life-to-date information, and that was a big recommendation from our auditors and something that has been in the works for a couple of years. As you know, we are in the midst of an audit from the state auditor's office on the waterfront TIF. We continue to oversee elections and try and innovate as we are doing both in-person and mail-in elections. We are managing all of the ARPA revenues and expenses and reporting. And at long last, all city departments are using electronic timekeeping instead of handwritten timesheets. This is a current org chart. There have been some changes. I've come to you sort of piecemeal, but one of the big things to take away from this is that I'm trying to eliminate the clerk/treasurer's office and really integrate this team so that it's not one side is the clerk and one side is the treasurer, but really to make that a more integrated whole. And here is a picture of our team. We often
Great photo.
Kerin did not want me to share this photo of her, but I think she looks great anyway. We often work and meet with the HR team, and this was a retreat we had last fall. At Letty. And here is at a very high level our overview of expenses and revenue. You can see our expenses are increasing, but so is our revenue. And as you know, because you have approved them, a lot of these additional personnel costs are not coming from the general fund. Those are coming from capital and ARPA. Usually in this meeting, we talk about audit findings. So again, this is a year where we did not have audit findings. We did have 3 recommendations. And as you know, we've been working hard to address those to ensure that our journal entries are completed in a more timely manner, and we're hiring staff for that. Improving our capital accounting, which has continued to be a focus, and working with DPW and solving the issues around the parking facilities. Our FY23 initiatives, we will continue to finish the TIF audit and implement all of the follow-up recommendations. We are getting ready to onboard a new grants director and associate so that we can get some more federal and state grant money, as well as a grants accountant and capital accountant so that we can build out that accounting team and be responsive to the audit recommendations. And as I mentioned, we will be integrating the accounts receivable and customer service teams under the operations director. And I thought I had a question slide, but I don't, and I'm happy to take questions if you have them. Yes.
I have one question. I can't remember now when it was that the retirement administration was brought from HR to the clerk treasurer's office. I'm feeling like it really wasn't that long ago, but time has a way of running away with itself, and maybe it was 5 years, I don't know. I'm assuming it was before your time.
It was just about when I got here.
Okay, so it hasn't been 5 years.
Yeah.
I'm feeling better. But yet that is a position that is vacant.
Yes.
So where are people going when they need, other than going to Rich, who probably has a few other things to do, where are people going when they have retirement questions, or is it Rich?
It's a combination of Rich, their HR manager, if they're an employee, and we do have a couple of additional resources in CT, and we realized we were leaning on some of those people who do have other day jobs as well, and that's why we needed to bring the retirement administrator back. So what actually happened when I started about 2.5 years ago, we had the retirement administrator. About a year in, as H&H had come on, we thought having them would be enough, and we wouldn't need like just one person in the city for people to go to. Then we realized over that next 1.5 years, we did in fact need someone to go to. People aren't comfortable with a company they don't know or with technology. So there are certainly fewer calls than even the 2 years ago that I've been here for the retirement, but it's still a needed source. And so right now, it's essentially dividing up between 3 people, and we would like that to be with just one person.
So, okay, so thank you. So that is a vacant position. When you go into the personnel expenses for 23, are you including that position?
Yes.
Okay, so the 328,000 is the difference.
Yes.
I don't know if you counted it in 22 and hadn't filled it.
No.
So it's all things being equal, or if in fact that is an additional position. And I don't know, I don't off the top of my head know the grade 19, how much that factors in terms of personnel, wages, benefits, et cetera.
That is one of the new positions that is factoring in, because we didn't have it in FY22, and those costs are borne by the retirement fund. So it's similar, like with the capital accountant, it also makes it look like the CT, if you just look at expenses, it looks like they're going up, but that's being paid for by the capital fund. So it's not a true cost. I mean, of course it's a cost, but it's not a cost being borne by the general fund at this time.
Yeah, but so that actually makes it, I mean, that makes a pretty big difference.
Yes.
I mean, that's not just semantics, that makes a difference. So if that's the case, then shouldn't there be another category that talks about what is actually being borne by the general fund, which is really what's responsible for tax increases, although of course the retirement is one component.
Yeah.
But I mean, it seems as though that 328,000, I'm just wondering, is that number $328,000 more out of the general fund? And it sounds to me like the answer is no.
No, so that's what I was attempting to capture at the bottom. I'll put this slide back up here.
You mean in terms of that note on?
Yeah, at the bottom,
450?
exactly. So it's really 450,000. So the difference is 328, but really there's $450,000 worth of increased costs. And I didn't mention retirement, but it's capital, retirement, assigned fund balance, ARPA, and I'm not sure if there's any others that I missed.
Okay, I mean, I guess it probably could include retirement, just so
Yeah.
that it's obvious, but
Yeah.
that's a pretty glaring, position that is open.
Yeah.
And I assume that's the same thing with the customer service associate, although that is general fund.
That's correct. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
I sort of had a related question
Mhm.
around the ARPA money.
Yes.
Is there any ARPA money that's being used to pay expenses in this upcoming budget year that'll then have to become part of the structural budget in following years?
Yes, it is for the grants accountant, and the idea behind that is this first year is paid for by ARPA, and then as the grants director and associate are bringing grants in, we build that grants accountant into those grants so that it becomes not a part of the structural budget, but built into new grants that are obtained over the next year.
And about approximately how much is that?
The grants accountant position, it's about 65,000.
I had one other small little question. When you're talking about operating expenses, so you mentioned that in FY22, we did 3 elections plus a recount.
Yes.
Now, I'm assuming for FY23, you're only including 2.
Yes.
So that's part of a little bit part of the 15,000, although it's probably more than that.
It's more than that. Unfortunately, while we're gonna have fewer elections, we are gonna have some increased costs. The state is bearing most of the costs for all of the new equipment that we're gonna get, but we're supposed to get new tabulators and all this stuff, but we wanted to build in, a little bit of cushion because of all of that transition. Any other questions? All right, let's move on to human resources.
I will come sit next to you, I don't know where.
And I will get your presentation too. Mhm, of course.
Okay, so this is my first time presenting for the budget. It's my first year at the city. I'm really happy to be here. I think everyone here knows what human resource does. I know that it's we are, we are the staff. I think really important to say when we're looking at this is that staff from the city, can go from anywhere from 600, I think it's 680 full-time employees, but then it can go up to over 1,200 during our seasonal times, and it can really, we're right in the middle of seasonal hiring. We're going to be onboarding hundreds in June. So one of the things that I did when I got here to stabilize the department, I came after the department was vacant, didn't have a director for over a year and a half. And so I realized right away that it was important to have an assistant director. I am seated in an appointed position. Should I vacate the position or should something else happen? I think there needs to be legacy, stability. I was able to come to the Board of Finance, ask for that, and was granted that. The assistant director covers benefits and risk management. And the reason for this is the city bears claims of about $1 million a month. That includes our regular medical claims, but also workers' comp claims. We've seen a steady decline since COVID, but since we hired all these new folks, we don't want to see that number go back up. So that person will look at employee safety and also, oversee our benefits vendor, which is Cigna. And then we have the rest of the department, talent recruitment, that is Vanessa. Most of you folks know Vanessa or have met Vanessa. 3 HR managers. We did hire an administrative coordinator because we do have a door to our office now that can be open. We are on site 5 days a week and we've been there since last June. So we are an in-person department. And I feel really strongly about that. Our employees, many of them first responders are here on site, so that's what we do. And then we have a generalist. That was a promotion that I went before the Board of Finance to cover. That person was just really serving in between 2 roles. So that's Orietta, and she does all of our generalist work. And here's the FY23 budget. Salaries and benefits take up most of it. I will just go over briefly the changes and then ask if there's any questions. This year, we feel really committed to digitizing our processes. That's going to be an efficiency that we're going to realize very soon. We're not traveling to do training. We have an amazing system here supported by our IT department, which is NeoGov. So we do a lot of training through that system. And then you can see the rest of our expenses there, our lease, our utilities, all the really exciting things about the HR budget. We are investing, do the next slide. Our focus this year is centralized recruitment. I did increase the budget on this line, and that's probably fairly obvious to Sarah, who's sitting on that, who chairs the HR committee. This has been one of the toughest labor markets in history. We are having, we've actually been fairly lucky to have folks, we've had some success filling positions. When I got here, there was over 70. Right now, there's still about 70, but a lot of those are seasonal. We're also trying to recruit for tough to fill positions, fire, police, recycle truck driver. So this is just some language to talk about how we decided to centralize it this year, dividing it by departments. But we decided that, maybe we would look at that and restructure a little bit differently since most people who were using centralized recruitment overspent. And we don't want to see those expenditures fall and not be able to be tracked. So we're looking for a little bit more money so that we can be responsible for that. Next slide. Oh, whoops. Back one more. I think we missed one.
Wait, did you miss another one? Oh my God, I was like, again? Oh my God, I remember the top end.
The end. Okay, there we go. You said I had to go fast. You meant it. So we did, again, we overspent. Some departments really had those crisis. We came to the Board of Finance many times asking for things like retention bonus, sign-on bonus. We tried to get super creative. We even flew in some folks. We wanted to have more of an EEO group, so we brought some people in from out of state to do some EEO recruitment. And so those are what those dollars are used for. And looking at the creative ways folks use to fill those roles, advertise for those roles, we need a little bit more money to keep on the path that we've been on. Local advertising is very expensive. We found that out when we really did some promos and an on-site job fair for DPW. And we're thinking about, we need to use the enhanced LinkedIn and the Indeed now. We can't just use the free versions of those. It's not working for us. All right.
The enterprise funds, do you charge back to them like BED?
We operate as overhead. Are you talking about enterprise funds?
Well, like the airport and the electric department.
Yeah. We operate solely general fund and we operate as overhead. I don't know. I'm afraid I'm not understanding your
Well,
question.
on the revenue side, do they?
There's
they
no-
contribute?
They can, all the, maybe the mayor can answer this question, but all of the enterprise funds pay a fee for HR services, city attorney, and those shared
Okay.
services.
I think, yeah, that's a more detailed,
Yeah.
they give us the money.
Yes, okay.
So we have zero revenue. So this is really just breaks down the focus areas. We are going to focus more on centralized recruitment. And this is just basically breaks down how we plan to do that. I can slow down if there's any questions on centralized recruitment, why we're doing it, because we're going to move on after this slide.
Well, I certainly understand why we're doing it. My question was that, some of the tougher ones like airport would be tougher, more expensive, that would be part of their departmental budget.
Well, it does come out of their budget. So we build it around, the expenses do come, we're centralizing it in our budget, but they're not keeping it. Certainly, we didn't just come up with this budget line and put it in here. So no, everyone's, but we just find it easier. Say, for example, EEO, say, for example, any of these things, they just don't have the operational
No,
power to.
Understood. I was just trying to track it on the revenue side because they're fee-based
Yes.
versus the other departments, which may be general fund based. So you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, but with the fee-based like the airport and BED, they have a way to.
And they all pay for those services, like HR and city attorney.
If Katherine was here, she could probably speak more to it, but that's what I'm going to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to speak a little bit further to it. I mean, there's a lot that goes into making sure that costs that should be allocated to the enterprise funds, the utilities, that happens in a fair and appropriate way. Where there's like a direct cost, where it's, isolated and, the centralized team has done something that, there's a discrete cost that can just be billed to an enterprise fund. We do it that way. Where it's more general, such as the city attorney's time, the HR director's time, the mayor's time, there's a big administrative fee that there's a lengthy formula that goes into it that allocates out all these shared costs in an appropriate, defensible way to the various non-general fund entities. I do think, it's a good question, Councilor Carpenter. I do think when we do something new like this, it's, worth flagging and double checking that this is getting worked into those formulas appropriately. But in general, you can be confident like there's a lot of sensitivity around what is a general fund cost versus a enterprise fund cost, and a lot of effort put into making sure that the taxpayers only pay for what it's really fair for them to pay for.
Yeah. Thank you. This is just a slide about services provided by HR. We don't really need to linger on this. We have made some changes this year, but in general, these would be found in most HR departments. It's a very large department, covers a lot of ground. A large workforce. So we have updated it to include our e-learn programs, and we also have done a lot of work on internships. and minimum wage. So this is just our services. And so this is the big one. This is our focus for FY23. We are still focused on ensuring that Burlington is an inclusive employer of choice. I'm really excited about a lot of things. I'm not going to talk about those things unless they're on the slide. We really wanted to improve HR capacity and service. I think I talked about digitizing processes. We don't want paper. We don't want paper applications. We don't want paper forms. We don't want paper COS forms. So we're really working hard on that. Through the HRIS systems, you'll see some of those things that I mentioned. We do want to complete a compensation study. I think that's really important for folks to understand. I know Councillor Hightower had mentioned that. We do want to make sure that we are competitive and that we are, that we are offering folks, fair wages. We did an equity study through BTV stat. We found the city to be very equitable across race and gender, which was really great. That was one of the first studies that I did. And then, we're looking at diversifying our 457 options. We've got a fully staffed office. That was something that just happened. So these are just some of our goals. And we're definitely looking at bringing back in-person affinity and white accountability groups. That was that's something that ended during COVID. So we are looking to do that, and employee satisfaction surveys as well.
On your compensation survey, will we also looking at benefits?
They will look at benefits, but I think you and I can talk offline. Basically, we're looking at base wages right now, just to make sure. I mean, with the city, again, that's another HR function. I work closely with Cigna, and we know that we're competitive, and we can talk a little bit about how that adds to the base wage. But I think by and large, we want to know dollar for dollar what the market, what are people putting in their advertisements? What are people saying? Like recycle truck driver, we know we're way behind there. And what can we do to get there? So no, I'm not gonna include benefits, but. All right, so we're on to the next slide. The other main focus is training and support for employees and managers. This is something that the team was working on before I got here. Obviously, we are all aware of the REIB anti-racism training program. I'm really excited to partner with Pitt and the team to support this with my team. We're going to be hopefully having new contracts and doing contract training, but the big focus is new manager and leadership training, having those things as you come in the door, understanding how to deal with the workers' comp claim, understanding our policy manual, and there's some other things listed here, ADA compliance, pretty standard HR stuff, but stuff that we want on a regular rolling annual schedule to ensure that everyone's getting what they need.
Just Catherine's son broke his wrist, so that's why she left.
Oh.
So he's gonna be okay, but that's why I stepped in for her and revealed
Do you have any questions? Any questions at all for me on the presentation, the budget?
We love
I'm off the
HR.
hook. We love HR. Yay.
presentation was so extensive.
It's extensive, but quick. My timer
Oh,
just
you
went off.
timed yourself.
I did. I forget to watch your riveting presentation. Sorry, I can't find yours. Send it over from your phone.
Karen said this was her first, this is my 15th, so I'll be okay.
You could probably just do it with no slides.
It's opening in 11 seconds. Right.
It's made, yeah, we have made background. The front page photo, yeah. DC LaChance planned that one. It was like first thing in the morning, shutting the street down. It's all about the sunlight. Yes, it's quite the-
It's really good.
Okay.
All right, good evening. I just want just first introduce my two deputies, Mike LaChance and Derek Libby. We really try to be a management team, so you always see us together so that we always can cover for one another and we all know what's going on within the organization. So you just go to the next slide. So we're authorized for 93 people, and we staff out of 5 stations, and we have fire stations, community fire stations, specifically so that we can solve our response time. And so whereas police deploy from one facility, we have 5 stations around the city with a goal of 6 minutes and 20 seconds for the time you call us so that we're in front of your door 90% of the time. And we want an ambulance to your door within 8 minutes. So that's the reason we strategically have fire stations around the city.
I don't know if you're gonna, this budget won't get into capital kind of expenses, will it?
No, with the exception, I'll tell you a little bit about some of our needs, what we
Okay.
feel is needs, but it does not get into, but I'm prepared to answer anything you might
Well,
have.
I'm just curious on the 5 stations we've had for a very long time and kind of looking forward, how do you assess, do we really need 5?
Can I speak to it at the?
Sure.
Because I have it.
Yeah.
I'm queued up for that later in the
Okay.
presentation.
Thank you.
And so, we have a training division staffed with just 1 person. We have a prevention division staffed with 3. Majority of our work are the members who in the street every day. We have those, that's the bulk of our workforce, about 84 of those that run just operations. Our calls have returned, just about almost 8,300 calls last year, calendar year. That was about returned a little bit more than pre-pandemic or about pre-pandemic. We took a pretty big hit reduction in 2020. People just didn't want to go to the hospital. So we saw a decrease there. Jordan. This is kind of our organizational structure. You see Chief Libby has most of the operations, while Chief LaChance has all the people problems and all the building problems. And so that is
I can verify.
why we love HR. But I mean, and really, it's just just managing COVID leave or managing FMLA with 93 employees. There are a lot of activities that both of these gentlemen do. But those 3 big blocks of battalion shift, A shift, B shift, and C shift are where the majority of our workforce are. There's 28 on each of those shifts. They're scheduled to work 24 hours on, 48 hours off. Everyone is working some degree of overtime, and we'll talk about that later, almost every day. We are people service. So about 95% of our budget, about 13.7 million in expenses, 95% of that is people. You add in our other fixed costs. So we have to have power, we have to buy gear, we have to buy hose. We're running, we have discretionary spending only of about 300,000 out of that 13.7 million. So we are really super lean. A little bit showing our revenues versus expenses on 23 versus 24, 22 versus 23. Basically we're gonna increase our revenues about 400,000 this year, and our expenses are expected to go up about 150. The vast majority of that 400,000 is all in ambulance transports. So we're projected to do about 750 more transports this year than last year. And we've increased through fee structure, better collection, better documentation by our members. We were doing our 5-year average before was about $365 a transport. We're about $410 a transport now. So that's how we generate our revenue. And I'll speak to how that helps us out on the next slide.
I'm sorry, I missed it. How much of your revenue is ambulance?
We project this year about 1.9 million. Almost and we generate another 400,000 out of the fire marshal's office. The vast majority of that is we monitor fire alarms in about 350 buildings at $600 a pop, plus false alarm fees that generate plans review fees for certain sprinklers and fire alarms. That generates about another 400,000. And that's been pretty consistent in my 6 years. So major accomplishments for FY22, in August of last year, we deployed that third ambulance to the new north end, the major increase in investment in the fire department. We feel like somewhat surviving, and COVID goes on today, surviving staffing changes, and only in a couple instances did we have to brown and rig out where we didn't have anybody to work. But by and large, probably less than 2 or 3 times. Certainly on one hand, we can count that we've had 22 people at work every day. And with between COVID and emergency leave and FMLA and injuries, on a normal year over the last 9 years, we spend about 12,500 hours of overtime. We're gonna break 25,000 this year. So every day we have someone working overtime every day, and it's highly likely we're mandatoring someone that they can't go home in the morning. That is probably the biggest challenge that we have had the last couple of months. We thought it was going to get better in last January when we had some new employees start on the line, and we had a couple good weeks, but by and large, we continue to struggle with that. We've oops, go back one more.
Oh, my gosh.
The end.
I'm sorry.
Oh, she said, I hit the time limit. Right there.
There.
Oh,
No, go back.
I swear.
no, you're right. So you're right. You're correct right there. So we currently have this fiscal year, we started 3 students in paramedic school. So we have 13 certified paramedics. That's the highest level of pre-hospital care we can have. We actually have 6 in school, so it takes about 18 months to get through it. So that's why we have 6 now. It's the group that started really in the fall of 21 that they're winding down, and then we'll send 3 more this fall. And so that takes, but the pipeline, we always have to be starting in the pipeline because some of those 13 will retire or move on. And so in order, our goal is to keep at least 50 or get in, but we'll have 19 here before long. With HR's help, we did make a pretty significant investment in wellness equipment. So all of our stations have a fitness equipment, but we were able to get about 10 grand of special money from the HR this year and to replace some aging stuff and some stuff we needed. And we made an investment, and really it hasn't been a monetary investment, but more an investment in time and leadership. Most of our executive team can retire anytime. And in fact, 2 of our senior leaders, one left last month, one leaves in 2 weeks. We're trying really hard to prepare the next generation. We are a young department. I think I've hired 52 people in my 6 years here.
Wow.
And so because of those reasons, we really are putting some investment in time and energy. We're running our first promotional preparation class, which is something we've never done before. But in order to help prepare the next generation of leaders, we're trying to make some real significant investment on our time. Next slide. So what's this? This budget will sustain. It really sustains our current level of service. We were able to raise revenues. As I think you are aware, departments were asked to make financial reductions or a 2.5% reduction. We were able to get through this without making any reduction on expenses by offsetting our revenue. So thanks to raising our rates, working hard on ambulance collections, we were able to absorb that. Our delta was about 337,000. We expect about 400,000 increase in ambulance revenue. So we were able to accomplish that without making a reduction in service. We did, however, move money around, which is detrimental. So, and I would say it's a little bit silly to say a $13 million budget when you talk about $8,000 trash bill. But when I started pre the recycling law with food scraps, we were paying out $4,000 for rubbish. Now we pay at $8,000. That's a new expense that we have to absorb someplace else. And that happens with electricity and many other things. So we're covering it without any increases, but we're moving money around and becoming more and more lean. It's not a sustainable way to operate, but we've been able to accomplish it in FY23. Next slide, please. So what are we looking for? We're excited on capital. So the capital bond that just passed included 3 new fire trucks, and those have just been ordered and this contract signed on. So we're excited to see those arrive in the next fiscal year. A new upgraded radio system, which will be a public safety radio system. So good for our responders. We are seeing challenges. Something the fire service has almost never struggled with is recruitment and retention of staff. And for the first time in my career, we were unable to fill all of our positions authorized to be hired. Now, we do things a little bit different, similar to police. We try to hire only once or twice a year. So it's easier because it's a 14-week recruit academy. It's easier for us to bundle those and hold those positions open. And this is for the first time ever we're not able to fill our positions. Normally you would get, these guys would say there was 300 people that applied for one job when they came on the job. And it was not uncommon that you would have to test a couple cycles. So that showed that you were interested, and that was the only way you really got in was the return. We had 65 people apply. Last time, only 30 of those met the minimum qualifications. We invited all 30, I think it was 32 for interviews. We saw 24, 25 show up. We had about 11 made job offers too, and we started a class of 6 when we had 9 openings. So we are, the Deputy Chief of Chancellor is really making an effort on recruitment. We're changing our cycle up. Perhaps we'll hit the college students who leave with fire service programs, using some of Kerin's money. So we know that for the first time, and we've had a high attrition rate. Our attrition rate over the last 5 years is 31%, which is really high, in my opinion, really high for the fire service.
Is that because of retirements or because of job?
Those are people that came in and left. That had nothing to do with people. That does not include people who retired. Of that 51 people we hired, 31% of those in the last 5 years are no longer employed. A couple of them we hope to leave, but that is not the majority. So again, we have some, but we work a 56-hour work week, which is versus a 42 that much of the rest of the world is. So there's a lot of things that go into it. I'm also, we talk about, so this is where I describe it as deferred capital maintenance. We have 2 fire stations, one over 100 years, so we have 5 fire stations, but one is over 100 years old, one is approaching 100 years old. 2 of them have common bunk rooms. When you're trying to hire females, that's a tough environment, is when you have common bunk rooms. At least we have one station only has 1 bathroom. So our facilities are old, without a doubt. In my professional opinion, our community certainly could, we could cover and this has been shown by independently as well. We could cover the city with 4 fire stations, strategically placed fire stations. So that is the difference, right? So it doesn't mean we just close.
So that means new.
Yeah, and plus it means we just don't close one and run out of four existing. It means that we have to relocate. But again, so understand that is something that concerns me and keeps me up at night, is the rear wall of a central fire station, or certainly the ramp going down, and it may be impacted by the Great Streets project when some of that work that's doing. That wall is tough to get down there now. The wall's leaning, and we're having it's old infrastructure. And certainly it will be similar to the building just up the street from it. It will be something that we'll have to eventually address, one way or the other. So deferred maintenance is a big one. And then I can't finish the presentation without, we still run 3 fire trucks with 2 people assigned to them. Industry best practice is 4, but 3 is what we run on our other trucks, and running two people is not the industry best practice, and certainly not our goal. But again, it's and we could achieve that at 4 fire stations today. Same number of bodies, just redeployed. But again, it's finding and acquiring the land and all the complications that come with station consolidation.
Maybe it's an offline question, maybe it's a Monroe question about keeping the downtown station, simply because at some point we want to develop that whole block. And as much as we love that building, it could be in the way. So maybe that's a morale question. Has that conversation come up at all?
I think we've had, I'll defer to the mayor if you want me to defer to you. I'll say, I think any station consolidation would involve the movement of the downtown station.
Okay.
Yeah, it's an appealing concept that at some level there, we've done analyses in the past that have suggested you could consolidate the central station and the Station 5 in a south end location somewhere on Pine Street, maybe around BED, Callahan Park. The challenge, particularly right now, is we're looking at something north of $15 million for a facility, probably, or more, and
Get that.
we would have very limited, I think, there'd be a very limited offset in terms of the savings of the capital, the sale or trade, if you will, of the central station or south end. Like, the value in those buildings is limited. There is value in, potentially, and there's some potential staff benefits that would seem to potentially justify it. How we do that in our current debt position, given the upcoming high school needs and whatnot, I think it's just very challenging right now. So it's appealing. It's something that's gotten a fair amount of attention. It's probably going to be some level of further discussion in our union negotiations that's coming around. It's we don't have a clear path right now to doing that, I would say.
Councillor Hightower has a question.
Yeah, and I think you actually answered my larger question. And just as you continued in the discussion, in terms of, it's, I guess, unfortunate that the downtown, that doesn't seem to be more of a, that we don't think that will have such a high sales value if we were to do anything else in a different location. And I think my other question, just to make sure that I understand the big picture, and thank you, Chief Locke, I think your presentations are always very clear and give a good overview to folks who have no idea how to run a fire station. But just trying to understand in terms of, like, and I think digging into the numbers will make this clear as well, but it looks like overall the reduction kind of that the departments are being asked to do, that you're mostly meeting that through an increase in revenue, which I think we saw that first piece of that a couple weeks ago. So maybe if you could just give kind of an overview of how that's affecting you all over the next year. And then on the deferred maintenance piece, I assume you don't have a number on this, but just, I guess, like, what the time span is on this, like if it's a concern now, like when that concern becomes like a urgent concern.
So the first part is, we solved our entire budget offset with revenue enhancements. So we're gonna see about $400,000 worth of new revenue from ambulance transports, and we're fortunate. I hate to say this, we're fortunate. People call us and we transport a lot of people. But I don't know that we won't see that again next year. We won't see another 400,000 next year. I would not think, or goodness gracious, I hope not, because that means we're taking a lot more people to the hospital. So that part of it is solved all with increased revenue, and we were able to then take any other monies to move them around to target our expense side of the house. But I think that's how that was handled. The deferred maintenance, and I say that meaning basically our old buildings, we'll continue to keep them up. Our staff takes great care of them. They really are. We love our old buildings. I mean, they have character, and think about the history and tradition and the people that walk through those doors. Eventually, my biggest fear is that the truck ends up in the basement. That sometime in the middle of the night, the floor collapse. I mean, we're buying, what's the weight on the ladder truck? 90 ton? 87-ton fire truck backed into a building with a basement under. Station 2 is getting ready for a new floor that they're going to have to put up, put steel in to hold up the existing fire trucks. Because they're 50 ton.
Years ago, to not put more than so many fire trucks in because the floor couldn't handle it.
So these are just long-term problems, and so I don't know that I can answer it well. I mean, I think that we've made some we certainly made some improvements, adding bathrooms at Station 2 used to only have one common bathroom that at least has now 3 individual bathrooms with showers. I've said it, ultimately, I'm a father of a daughter. Would I want her working in a fire station in a common bunk room and with one bathroom? And my answer to that's no. And so that's the type of thing that we've been able to dodge and weave. We're down to just one station that has one bathroom, but that's where your uniforms kept too. That's where the lockers are kept. And it worked well in the 1920s when the fire station was built. It doesn't work so well in 2020.
Thanks.
you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think so.
Sorry.
I just said thank you. We're good.
Okay. All right. So yeah, that is obviously a concern. I mean, if we're going to recruit broadly, we have to have places where everyone feels comfortable. My questions are, so first, I would say that probably as long as we've been talking about regional dispatch, we've been talking about eliminating fire station. So this is not a new conversation. It seems as though we talk about it, and because it's not like a pressing priority, we just put it off till the next year, the year after that. And that is so it goes. Now, once you come into work one day and find a fire truck in the basement, then it'll be a conversation. And I think that's unfortunate, but I think that's, with all the pressing priorities that we have for debt, that is the reality. But it will be addressed, whether we want it to be, and we may not get to choose when that happens. My question is, in terms of, and maybe this is, I just want to make sure that I understand, there are departments that are not revenue centers. They just aren't. That's just not the nature of what they are. I was not aware that the directive that you received was, if you can increase your revenue, then you don't have to make cuts in your department, even though you're part of the general fund. Whatever increases you have aren't shared by everyone. They're only within the fire department, which means that departments who don't have any sources of revenue, don't have the ability to be, at all creative because of the nature of what they do, they will be forced to make cuts. But because you have found other sources of revenue, you don't have to do that. And I just want to make sure that I understand that correctly.
I'll say this. I don't want to speak for Katherine. That was how I interpreted the direction and how I dealt with the problem that was given to me actually, that's not true. I submitted 2.5% worth of reductions. On top of, I can also solve this problem by doing this. I will tell you that I cannot make 2.5% reductions. I can't make 1% reduction without cutting people. So, my plan for 2.5% reduction, and I don't have it with me, is probably to cut 9 people and close the ambulance in North End.
So I would, given the fact that most departments are very dependent, they're completely centric wages and benefits. There probably are other departments who could say exactly the same thing. They cannot make a 2% reduction. They can't even make a 1% reduction without it costing jobs. So I would imagine that you're probably in the same boat as everyone else. And certainly you can make the argument, like I'm sure everyone does, that their department is critical because it's public safety. Other people will make similar arguments that their department is critical for other reasons. And I'm not faulting you at all for making that argument. I would tend to agree with you. Public safety is very important. But I guess what I'm saying is I just want to make sure that I understand that was the understanding, was that if you were able to increase your revenue, that you didn't have to make a cut.
That's not exactly the way it's phrased, but I mean, we've been very clear throughout these budget presentations that the $1 million in improvements have been made through a combination of revenue changes and expense cuts. The fire department, as we've discussed many times, has even less flexibility, has substantially less flexibility than most departments on the expense side because of the minimum staffing contractual requirements that we negotiate and have made. There is not a lot of discretionary spending on the fire side. So I think we're fortunate in a year where we need to stretch ourselves. The fire department has this, now approved way of increasing revenues. It's certainly a fire department. Many of our departments do have revenue generation capacity, and where there's a sensible way of approaching that, it's something we have looked at here. I have a allergy to pursuing revenue enhancements where they're going to create serious equity issues, and we had a good discussion about any equity concerns with this with this change. So we'll take this discussion on a department by department basis. It's not the only place where we are solving the problem in part with revenue, with a revenue change.
Well, as I say, I mean, this is the first night. So, I don't know if there are others that are in the same situation where, for example, Parks and Rec found other revenue sources and that was how they met their budget challenges. I'm just asking the question.
Well, and just to be clear, like we submitted 2.5% with reduction. So, the plan is there, right? It's a public document that's been submitted to the CAO on how the fire department's going to address a 2.5% wage budget reduction. So we did that exercise, but in the same document, we provided an alternative. And then I'll defer them to the mayor and Katherine.
I want to add and just make sure people remember the history too. We certainly have chronic capital concerns with firehouses. Over the last decade, since we created a capital position to use what was at the time, back a decade ago, relatively new. People remember the situation a decade ago. Late in the KISS administration, they sought and secured the ability to bond on an annual basis for capital improvements. When this administration started, very little of that money had been spent. There was structural problems in actually getting that money invested. We largely addressed that structural problem with the creation of the position that Martha Keenan occupied over the last decade. It definitely benefited the fire department that a spouse of a former fire department official was in a key role in there. We have made many fire department investments with those capital resources over the last decade. I do think one of the things that was negatively impacted by the need to reduce the bonding amount, there's some less money going into buildings from the $24 million bond that was approved than had been in the $40 million bond. But we are continuing to make it investments at a rate that compares favorably to what the city has ever done in recent memory. We also have done structural analyses and certainly, Chief, if you're serious about the idea that you think we have structural concerns at that level, that is something that that needs very serious examination. I don't believe that the evaluations of the buildings that have been made in the recent property assessments, anything that arrives to that acute level of concern has been, to my knowledge, addressed, and we will, that continues to be the way to approach these things. Agree with President Paul that, and again, that I just want to be clear too. This is not the station consolidation has not been an idle conversation that there has not been proactive work on. We've commissioned studies and analyses of this. The challenge, we have a very serious capital challenge in terms of pursuing it. I do think it's something we are going to need to talk more about, and probably talk, and again, is going to be an active conversation in the upcoming bargaining. And I think we should have a further council conversation about what our posture is going to be on that before that bargaining begins.
Erin, you have a question?
I did, and I'm not quite sure the best way to phrase it. I was gonna ask if any time recently you've had sort of an external evaluation of the operations, and I'm gonna liken it to the CNA report, which was asked for very different reasons. But, you know, of the 92 people, are there any different ways of doing things, different ways of staffing? And I'm not suggesting that there are, and I'm not aware of problems, but I'm sort of more curious. I mean, and, you know, if you've had any kind of external evaluation and or that's whether something we should think about, particularly in light of the amount of overtime you have to pay, recruitment issues. And again, I'm not suggesting it for a problem, but, you know, going into the brave new world, are we going to have to start looking at things a little bit differently than they were done?
So the short answer is no, we have
Okay.
not.
Okay.
I will say this, like, we would always welcome any type of review of the operations. One of the real challenges, you know, comes is that there's not a lot of the scheduling of how firefighters work, you know, nationwide. There's a few models, but we run a 3-platoon schedule. I mean, there's 3 shifts. So a lot of the country's on a 4 shift. And so in order to get a lesser, that's a lot of people. A lot of people that we're not. So we're trying to find other ways within a 3-platoon model that gets our people some more time off. And I think so. But to answer your overall question, no, we have not had an outside assessment.
And I'm asking out of curiosity, and I don't see an urgency, but it's something, I mean, and I'm often asked probably more on the ambulance side than the fire side, you know, are there different ways to respond on that side? And I don't have an answer, but I'm just asked that.
I think we would love to change our deployment model on, you know, how we respond to medical calls. I think we would love to be able to, similar to the police, have a greater mental health component. And I think that's obviously something the mayor's working on. You know, we deal with many of the same patients every day. And often it's not uncommon for us to drop them off and they be discharged before we finish our people.
I'm well aware of that.
So, but that's not going to change. It's not going to change quickly.
No, and I know, but I think, and maybe that's phase 2 of this discussion in terms of the mental health crisis and the recycle patients, but you know what I mean?
High frequency users.
High frequency users.
I had a question about the attrition rate. It was kind of alarming to me to hear that you have a 30%. So you say 30% attrition rate over 5 years. What would you attribute that to mainly?
So interesting. So, you know, if I was losing people to another fire department, I'd be scared. We've lost one, and he went back home to New Hampshire where he grew up, right? Hometown kid. People are coming onto this job, and it's not what we anticipated it to be. It's not what we thought it was going to be. I tried it. Now I'm ready to go do something else. My generation, when we came on the job, you worked through retirement. It's just what you did. That's no longer the workforce. So, you know, we've had people leave to go do a landscape business. I'm going to backpack across the country. You know, so unfortunately, so as part of the recruitment process is taking away the flashy photos of fires and telling people, being very honest, that you're going to be doing 75% of your calls are going to be the medical calls. A whole bunch of those are unfulfilling. And so it's not, I've had people leave going in exit interviews. It's just not, the work's not rewarding. Those same patients we dealt with, just the names and faces change, but the workforce has more opportunities and they want to do something different. So that, I'll say, a long way of saying, it's not a singular issue. If it was, I think we very easily could fix it, but it is quality of life. We work 2,900 hours a year. Normal job is 2,080. That, you know, that you're always either that work schedule, you're always coming or going.
Well, my question about the assessment was sort of driven by that. Again, I don't have any, you know, what are the young people want?
So
how do you create, if it's 75% ambulance, how do we train people that side versus.
It'll be interesting, we just have a behavioral health assessment done, survey, and hired a contractor to do that. And that's coming out early June. I would not be surprised if we didn't glean some information from that tells us perhaps some internal cultural business that we may be able to use to help us. So.
And this is more generic, but since you're a big user and you have your own union contract, and Kerin and I discussed the need for the city, and I'm saying this generically, used to be, like you said, you went in, you stayed with the fire department for 20 years, you had the promise of a really good pension and da-da-da-da. And I sense there's a lot of young people only want a job for 5 years. The draw of the pension may not be there, even though it probably should be, it isn't. So I'm just saying this is a more generic, because you happen to be in front of me, and I think as the city, we're gonna have to wrestle with some of those issues, because I think that's a problem in the employment.
It is, and if it was unique to Burlington Fire Department, I'd be scared. But all of my colleagues around the country are dealing with the same thing. So it's not here, it's not the city, it's not the state. All of us are dealing, all the fire services dealing with this. We just never had it.
Other fire questions? But we are mostly on track. Any other fire questions? No? All right,
Thank
moving
you.
on to assessor. Queued up your presentation, John.
John, I love you, but
See, that's what I'm gonna say. That's what I am. I know, I just. Okay, all right.
All right, thank you. We are the small department that I feel does a lot. What we do is right there on the list. Our goal basically is to have fair values for everybody. And it started off with the reappraisal and trying to put values at market again and be compliant with the state rules and that also follow guidelines of the International Association. And it's also having our data access to the public so that they have the ability to review their own property values as well as other people's property values. And we hold hearings right now. We are in the process of scheduling hearings for the Board of Assessors. And right now we have about 30 appeals that we will be holding in 2 weeks. I guess that's speaking to the next one. We're a small staff. Currently, we have a staff of 3 people, myself, a deputy assessor, and an associate assessor. We have some funds for another appraiser, which I think would hugely benefit the city. It's a position that's currently vacant. And then we also have a little bit of funds for some temporary assistance as we get busy in this time of year, this spring, trying to do our evaluation reviews, finalizing them, a lot of checks, and business personal property comes up all at once. And so we are sort of through that process, but we'll have some work in the next month or 2 wrapping up the grant list for the year. In short, this year the grant list is about $30 million more than it was prior to the prior year. We did a lot of adjustments to certain commercial properties that were affected by COVID. We wanted to increase those as they are moving away from COVID and their cash flows are stabilizing, adding more value. The next one. Budget trends. Not much to change. Although we came up a reappraisal year, during the reappraisal, we had approval for 5 people, and we have 3 currently with a little bit of help, and we want to fill another position so that we have the ability to do more property reviews and inspections. Ultimately, one lesson I think that we've learned is that if we had the ability to visit and do an inspection of every single property that sells, that data would be correct, and we would have a snapshot of what the market pays for a particular property, and whether the data would be correct. So that's a very important step for understanding the market trends, and building tables that are get completely readjusted during a revaluation. So our goals are to hopefully do more inspections, do more reviews. We always want to increase those to inspect the sales. There's about 450 bona fide market sales a year. There's other transactions as well that fall off. And to do that, we're going to need to hire a position. And then also currently there is about 20 property appeals going to the state of Vermont and to court. It's actually less than that because we've had a few of them resolved. We receive about $105,000 from the state of Vermont each year for what we call grandless maintenance and future reappraisals. We try to put that money into a fund for the next revaluation. It'll help offset the cost. I think this past reappraisal was about 1.1 million. So if we do a reappraisal and hopefully in 4 or 5 years, it'll offset some of that expense. I think I'm all set, happy to answer questions.
Now, I don't know if you're going to get into this with the subcommittee that's looking at the reappraisal process, but I would hope this isn't going to affect you this year, but the part of that comes out with sort of alternate designs, like if we did rolling appraisals, or you had more staff capacity, or I don't know what the answers are, but I hope we kind of look at that, and we definitely cannot wait 10 more years. So, I just hope that that picture gets looked at, and it's painful. I get it, but and I think more modestly, and I'm saying this also to Moreau, that the 105,000, I mean, is that something legislatively we could and should lobby for? And there's basically, because of the lag problem, there's been a series of conversations about how to fix that, but we should be mindful, I think, to try to tee up a few legislators about, are there some changes we could and should make the next biennium that would benefit Burlington? I don't know.
I don't want to interrupt, but the 105 comes from $8.50 per parcel, and there's some movement to push that to have it changed. I think that's been around for about 10 years, and it hasn't changed, but expenses have changed, of course. So we're hoping that that's $13, $14 per parcel would be more fair and would help pay for that. Obviously, I think that the state is concerned because of the education grant list is really on them, and I think that's why we were able to get that, not just Burlington, but all municipalities. And of course, the city has some responsibility to pay for a portion of it, I think, personally. But if the state can pay for the entire amount, that's good on us. I think that this ad hoc committee is going to be beneficial. They're going to come up with some good ideas. They are working hard. We did a presentation yesterday. Alan Berkey put a presentation together. They have an agenda. It's on the website. You can find that through the assessor's website. And I only think that good things will come out of that. So,
Well, and I encourage us, and I'm saying this to the mayor as well, that early this fall, that we, if there's legislative items, that we try to get those on people's radar early, sooner than later.
Okay.
I don't have questions. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no.
I don't have questions other than I guess I have a comment, and I work on the Board of Tax Appeal and just through constituent interaction, it seems like your department is tapped out most of the time, or has been, at least since I've been on the council. It's like and it seems like a lot of the work comes sort of like in huge hunks. It doesn't, the way the calendar is, you get a reappraisal, and then you have all of these appeals that your department has to spend a lot of time on. And I am looking, I mean, I have no questions about your budget. I'm sure, I think you probably, you're an important function of the city, and you're probably operating too leanly right now. And I welcome the idea of adding additional capacity to your office. But it seems like I'm hopeful that there will be some adjustments to the way we do this, systemic adjustments to the way we do reappraisals, to the way the state appropriates money for them, to sort of even them out over time, rather than having to be these huge sort of episodic things that happen, in our last case, 15 years, right?
That was unusual, but in the past, if you look at it, it was almost as though there was a reappraisal every 10, 11 years. That's still too long. I was here in 2005. I started in 2001, so I was there for the last reappraisal, and it was busy just as well, just the same. There was a lot of appeals as well, and we were in an up market, like a tremendous up market. 2006, remember that? 2008, things slowed down. So what happened, why this was longer, is because the market tended to, call the market crash, but really values held pretty well in Burlington. Burlington's pretty resilient for a handful of years. So the equity sort of stayed the same at that point, and then the market started changing over time, and it just accelerated. We were told to do this reappraisal in 2017, and it takes a couple of years to gear up for it, because you have to go contract, and then you have to go through the process of changing your software, which is outdated every 10 years and so forth. So the process took a while, and at that same time, the market was still moving quite a bit. And then, of course, COVID added injury to the whole thing. But we're through it, and everyone has an opportunity to appeal, and we hope that we've done the best job that we could. I wish we had more staff and there was more time to pay more attention to every single property, but we do now. I mean, we'll do a write-up for every single appeal. We didn't have time to do that much.
I just wanted to mention one thing, because Sarah, you brought this up. When you were talking about the work of the ad hoc committee, getting it in the queue sooner. So on our consent agenda for the last meeting, we passed there was a letter from James Unsworth, who is the chair, and he lays out a timeline. And I'm wondering, obviously this is not directly related to your budget, but I'm just wondering, what he has said is that the goal will be to begin the work of the final report following the October 11th deliberative meeting. And we passed this, no one said anything, but that doesn't mean that, that's just a statement of fact. The other fact is that, we can always go back to him. Is October 11th probably means the report won't come to us until the end of October. Is that too late?
Well, I would suspect, and I can't, there'll be things the city can control and manage. I'm just thinking more philosophically, like if we want to make that fee $14, and I know there's an association of assessors. There's going to be some key things to sort of get on the docket, which is kind of a little different than I think what the report's going to come up with. And so I was just suggesting some of those key legislative things we get on the docket, or not that, we call together a meeting, we get something like whoever's going to run. And it's a lot because they're all running for the State House now. So when I say get on the docket, it's about the time you pin down candidates, but because they're all running. But just, I was saying to John, there's a few issues we should flag. We should just do it sort of parallel to this.
Okay.
And I'm happy to give my 2 cents to James, or it's not either or. I think things like do we have more rolling reappraisals, how the staffing is gonna work? How do we handle the public education for reappraisals, all the stuff on, all the questions that was asked in the resolution and coming out in the report, I think October is probably fine. I was just trying to flag if there's a couple of other issues, we should just not let them wait too late.
Well, as it gets closer to October, we may change our minds.
Yeah.
But I think the letter that I got was incredibly proactive.
Yes.
And I think they're taking the work very seriously. And maybe they'll be ahead of schedule. Who knows?
Well, I think it's,
Anyway, I don't want to be
John has
like.
years of experience, but it's flagging what needs a change by the state versus what the city can control or not.
I think you're suggesting that we look at whether some inflator on this decade-old fee is a totally good one, and I don't know. We'll look into it, and there's a cycle for reviewing fees by agency. I don't know if this fits into one of those, and but it's a good question, and we'll track it down well in advance of next fall.
Just a quick question about bullet point on the second to last slide about hiring additional real estate appraiser. Is this position you all posted previously, or you hope it post?
We have posted this in the past. It doesn't offer enough money, so there's no interest. I think I had someone that was interested during the reappraisal towards the end, and they just couldn't make it. The money's just not enough. So I'm hoping to ask for higher, more competitive salary to get that filled, and I hope that it continues on for the next couple of years, because honestly, I think that we're going to have reappraisals within 5 years. The market is the way the market's been moving. I know it'll slow down, but it's going to come sooner.
Well, you can't find, I mean, I can verify,
It's hard, right?
holding up every single house closing in Canada. No, I'm not, it's like the other one. I just heard a story about a city employee who bought a house and it came in, took the appraisal risk and it came in $27,000 higher. And so, because he didn't put it in as a contingency.
Any other questions? That was our last presentation.
I guess. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you all. I'm sorry, I gotta run though.